Hey guys, David Stewart here. Wanted to talk a little bit today about the music industry in general and some of the expectations you should have if you're getting into music and wanting to be creative in particular, wanting to create your own music. Um, and what I want to show you real quick is something that's been sort of happening a lot in the metal scene, which is a great number of acts are giving up the business. They're quitting the business. They're stopping playing music. They're saying, I'm not going to play in a band anymore. I'm not going to tour. I'm not going to do this music thing anymore. And the reason, over and over again, is the same as this one, that they can't afford to play music anymore. So this is a guy from a band called Aeon, and whether or not you like him, it doesn't matter. It's we really just need to think about the business. This is a metal band. They're a fairly popular metal band as far as things go. They're not on the level of like really overground bands like Slayer or someone like that, but they are fairly popular as far as underground bands go. Um, it's with a heavy heart that I've decided to call it quits. Why? I simply can't afford doing this no more. Let's forgive the English. Um, Basically, he says, I am losing money touring. Um, and this kind of flies in the face of what a lot of people um, think now about the music industry in general. Record sales are basically in the toilet and have been since Napster. Once people figured out that they could steal a product for with virtually no effort and virtually no consequence, you started to get a lot of theft. In fact, just anecdotally, I asked one of my classes, which are high school students, I asked them like, uh, how many people like I asked them like, what's your favorite album? And I was just pulling some kids and no one could answer, and I just asked the class, hey, who has actually bought an album? And not a single person raised their hand. Not out of 30 plus people, no one had bought a CD. And out of all my classes, only maybe like four out of like 120 kids had ever bought a CD. They'd ever bought music. They have never exchanged money for music. This is that 12 to 18-year-old demographic that was the huge moneymaker in the 90s. When I was 17, I had hundreds of albums, and I had paid for those albums basically by, my dad would give me lunch money, and I wouldn't eat lunch. I didn't eat lunch all through high school. I didn't eat lunch, and the reason was because I would take that money and I would save it, and I would save it up, and I would buy music with it. That's how much I cared about what I was doing. And to see now that same age group, nobody pays for music is really revealing. What it basically means is that our next generation, our younger generation, to them, music is literally worthless. It is literally has no value because they could get it for free. And the expectation is that you could get it for free. You can just steal it. You can download it. You can just watch it on YouTube without ever paying an artist for their money. There's never that exchange of a product, an album, for money. And that's the way that musicians have made money, particularly in the recording industry, as opposed to say like classical guitarists playing recitals. That's the way that they've made money for the last 50 or 60 years, is that they've sold records. Um, and the other side of that, so I'll come to the other side of this, but there was a really famous South Park episode that came out where basically the boys were arrested for downloading all these MP3s from Napster, like downloading Judas Priest and stuff like that. And then they had this sort of um, this takeoff scene from what's the movie? It's a Christmas movie. It's a Beautiful Life, or is it A Wonderful Life? It's A Wonderful Life, where he takes them and he shows them all of the artists who can't afford to buy like the best jet because somebody downloaded their music, and that really expressed a perspective that I think a lot of people understood it. And they said at the end of the show, hey, if people really like your music, they'll still pay to see you at a show. And that's sort of true. If people like your music, they will pay to see you at a show. um, but I think this reveals, and I'll show you a bunch of other examples, that uh, touring, playing concerts, is not a money-making endeavor. And it hasn't been for some time. The overhead is so high, like insurance costs, the cost of the venue, the cost of transport, the cost of staff to help you run the show. All these things add up. Even when I was in a band and we played bars and things like that, like we would make $50 for like 3 people, which is terrible for hours and hours of work. It's never been good money to be a musician, especially if you're like an up and coming musician as opposed to, say, a very well established musician like Slayer or someone like that. And the idea has always been like, oh well, it's an investment. Like you invest in building this fan base, and eventually, like you make money from it. But that, I believe, is not really the case anymore. I don't think live shows are quite as profitable as people think they are. In fact, what this guy says is that he lost money on every single tour, and he came out and did it because he thought the fans wanted to see it, and it was basically charity. Like he was basically playing. He was paying to play for his fans, and wasn't making any money on tour. And of course, you're not going to make any money making an album because people are just going to steal it. So I think Trey and Matt were wrong about that. That like if people really like your music, they'll come see you. Yes, but that's not been a big money making endeavor. The way that the industry sort of worked, say 20, 30 years ago, is that you'd go play through a town, and that would generate enough interest to sell your records, and you'd be making money. Sort of, it would roll along as people bought your records, and that's not really, it's not really the case anymore. And there's a whole bunch of other ones. This one was from 2013. He said, "I can't afford to play music anymore. I can't afford to do this whole heavy metal thing." And I am going to focus on heavy metal, but I think this is probably more true in genres like jazz, or folk music, or anything like that, because you're dealing with still a form of music that's a little bit outside the mainstream, but one which doesn't have quite the like fanatic culture that's surrounding metal. So it's probably even harder in jazz. Jazz has a really good culture, but it's not the same as metal. Metal fans really love metal, and they invest a lot of money in it. People buy albums, people buy vinyls. You'll find bands that you probably never heard of if you're not into metal will sell lots of vinyl, and there's a lot of support. And the fact that people are saying I can't afford to do this anymore is really true. So another one, this is a band that you may not like called Thy Art Is Murder. They're kind of like a metalcore band or like a deathcore band. They're not my favorite kind of music, but that it doesn't matter whether I like them. Lots of people like them. They had like 400,000 Facebook followers, which is quite a lot. And so the vocalist said that he couldn't afford to do it anymore, and he said his band only earned $16,000 to $18,000 each over 6 to 7 years. That's $2,500 a year per member, like making music, which is nothing. That means you have to have a second job to support making music. It's a huge time loss as well. So that time that you spend touring, you're not spending making money elsewhere, which makes it even harder. Not only that, but you can't hold down like a regular job and tour. It's really, really difficult to do that because you have to tour for months on end, and then you end up not making money. I'm going to assume that he means $16,000 to $18,000 a year each, which is still below the poverty line. That's almost nothing. That's not enough money to raise a family on, certainly. It's enough money to live if you're a single guy. Certainly, I've lived on $1,000 a month without too many issues. But that was just me by myself. Now I have a wife, I have children, I have to have more stuff to do. So he says, I spend too much time away from my fiance, family, and friends. Touring has taken a massive mental and physical and emotional toll. I have earned between $16,000 and $18,000 each. That's what the band's earned, and there's something massively wrong with this, and I will not live like this anymore. So he was also saying that I'm going to sell my stage jacket to try to pay for my wedding, and basically I'm going to have to get a regular job because I can't afford to do this anymore. And I really, really understand how that is, having been a musician for a long time, having played a lot of venues, even as a soloist. It's very difficult to make a lot of money. And this keeps going. This band Indian calls it quits because they can no longer do it. They can no longer really make music as a band. The drummer from In Flames, who's a huge metal act, that is as big a metal act as you're going to find in the actual metal scene. He quits because he needs to spend more time with his family and to work on other businesses and things like that. It's a big loss here. This other band, Conducting The Grave, or Conducting From the Grave, they're And again, not my favorite kind of music, but it doesn't matter because what matters is that other people like it, other people have invested in it, and they still can't make any money. Um, we all grew up before our band was able to achieve any realistic financial stability for 5 people to pay rent and raise families on. So basically, what the expectation that you're going to do if you're in a band is that you're going to come out with albums and go tour and play shows. And let me tell you, I would not tour 200 days out of a year right now, not with a 5-month-old at home. There's just no way in hell that I would do that. Didn't even It wouldn't matter if I could make as much money as I make with my day job. I wouldn't do it because I'd have to be away from my family. But even then, I couldn't. I can only probably reasonably expect if I really busted my ass to make $12,000 in a year, and that's not enough to support my family. So I got to do something else. I got to go teach. I got to keep with the. I've been a teacher for a really long time, so that's not anything new to me. But certainly, I couldn't afford to drop what I'm doing now and go tour and go do metal full time or anything like that. Another one is this is actually a little article, and this is all from Metal Injection. You may not like that site, but they do have like a good little category here on band breakups that makes it really easy to look up these stories. So check them out. Morbid Angel has been breaking up and getting back together for years and years. They are as big a death metal band as you'll find. Probably Morbid Angel and Cannibal Corpse are the two biggest names, along with Deicide. But Morbid Angel was always one of my favorite bands, especially their early stuff. Well, Tim Young quit the band, and he says it was due to financial differences. And that basically means they're not paying him enough money to keep playing in the band. So if you're not making enough money, you got to peace out. You got to do something else. Another band that quit here that said they can't really continue doing it. This is kind of an interesting band, 3 Inches of Blood. Very metal. I'll leave it at that. Another band that I'm not crazy about called In Solitude. They broke up last year or this past year, mostly because of, quote, personal changes in their lives. Changes in our personal lives demanding that we treat this as carefully as we could. They just didn't really want to come out and say, but whenever you say changes in your personal life, what you're really meaning is, I don't have the time to do this anymore. I have to pay for other things in my life, and this is not really a profitable endeavor. So this is something that I see a lot in metal, but I'm sure it's out there in the jazz scene as well. People can't necessarily afford to do this. The thing about metal is that most of these metal guys don't have a second gig that lets them easily keep making music casually. They don't really have a teaching gig. A lot of jazz players have a teaching gig, or they have a studio gig. They have a lot of stuff that they can do besides touring. Because metal is such a selective genre and it's so hated by so many people, you're probably not going to have a lot of other people who have a teaching gig. One person that I think about in the business that sort of organizes their life and their music around these realities, the reality that you're just not going to make a lot of money doing this, is Isan, one of my favorite guitarists, one of my favorite vocalists, one of my favorite just creative types in metal. He was the vocalist and lead guitarist for Emperor, and he's had an illustrious solo career. He's one of my favorite guys. Every time he comes out with an album, it's always interesting, even if I don't love everything on it. He teaches 9 months out of the year, and he only really tours in summer. So he goes out and he basically plays festivals with a solo band or with Emperor, and otherwise he's not out touring. He doesn't subscribe to that old philosophy of we have to go out and we have to tour and we have to promote this band. He comes from having done that in the 90s, and so now he doesn't necessarily have to do that. But at the same time, I would still encourage anyone who's interested in pursuing metal or rock or something that requires these performances and is getting into that kind of music business, that you really consider adjusting your expectations down to meet what is realistic. And the realistic thing is you are not going to make money in this business. There's no money left in the music business. You have to do it because you really want to do it, because you're passionate about it. And the chances of making money, although slim, will not happen if you're not passionate about your product. You have to come out with the best product you know how to come out with, or you're not going to even recoup your costs, much less make money. Nobody gets into the music business for the money, at least not in metal or anything like that. So you really have to think about what you're passionate about doing and pursue what you're passionate about doing. I would recommend that you think about recording albums before you think about touring, so that you have music ready to go and you have something to sell at a show, because you're not really going to make money playing a show. Another thing too, a lot of people think that if you're in a big city, there's a lot of performance opportunity, and that is not necessarily the case either. Last time I lived in LA, when I lived in LA, which is the last city I lived in, most of the clubs no longer paid bands to play at them. I went and saw Gamma Ray, which is an amazing band. I highly recommend checking out Gamma Ray if you're into power metal, and especially seeing them live. They're an amazing live band. And there was a bunch of bands that played before them. They were mostly local acts, and all of them basically paid to play that show. They did not. They were not paid by the venue. They were not paid by Gamma Ray to open. They paid the venue to play on the bill with Gamma Ray. Gamma Ray was the only band who probably made money at the show. And in order to recoup their costs, they had to go out and sell tickets. And the whole point of this is that, yeah, if you're a band willing to go out and sell a couple of hundred tickets and push tickets on people, you might be able to break even. And then you have a little bit of an exposure playing with Gamma Ray. But because there's so little profitability even for the venue, and this was at the Key Club, which has since closed down because it's not profitable. Because there's so little profitability left in the venue, they really have to do this in order for them to break even. And obviously the Key Club, which was doing this, was really not breaking even. And not for lack of shows. There were great shows going on there all the time, but they still couldn't make the money. And I don't run a concert venue, but my guess is there's a lot of expenses that you don't think about. Property taxes in LA are sky high. Cost of doing business is sky high. The cost of labor is sky high in LA. Insurance is going to be very, very, very high for a venue where you're having metal shows. So all those expenses add up. They really have to then pass those expenses on to the bands, and the bands are kind of left being screwed over. They're the labor, they're the entertainment, they're the draw, and they're the only one. They end up being the ones not making any money because everybody else has to cover their costs too. And because this is a really awful thing, but whoever is the most passionate in any sort of arrangement is the one who ends up doing all the work for the least amount of money. Routinely you get artists that are told, hey, if you're passionate about it, you'll do it. And it's like, yeah, just because I'm passionate about it doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to recoup my costs, or I shouldn't be able to at least make a dime at this. And now we're entering, I would say, with all those things in mind, we are now entering a time in which, as an artist, you can't expect to be paid for your work. And that means that you have to adjust your output down. Because if you had the ability to play music full time without any interruptions, like that was your business, you'd be able to come out with a lot more music than if you were working 8 hours a day at a day job and then coming home to try to be creative. And I know that from experience because I write books, I create music, I do lots of creative things, and I have to do it on my own time. I've never been able to really do it full time, except for a couple of times in my life where I really made a lot of money as a performer. But even then, as a performer, I was performing like classical guitar repertoire and not really doing my own creative thing. And because of that, you end up, not as artistically fulfilled as you might otherwise do. Now, I talked about this in my Should I Get an Arts Degree video a long time ago. I really recommend, if you're trying to get into this business, that you pursue at least one other marketable, valuable skill. That way, when your music starts to go south, or when you're unable to make money playing music, you can still pay the rent. And you can always withdraw a little bit and say, hey, you know what, I'm not going to tour this year. I'm going to take a step back, and I'm going to work on my welding business and save up some money to progress my personal life. Yes, it's harder to have the output when you're doing it part-time. But for most of these people, most of these bands that we're looking at here, they all have day jobs. they have to do something during the day to pay for what they do at night and to invest in the equipment. Music's a big investment. Um, One of the reasons I became a classical guitarist and a solo guitarist is because I could split the money one way. Um, I got all the money and then I paid my taxes. So the only person I had to split the money with was the government. Whereas playing with, even when I played in the trio, we made very little money, and splitting it three ways, and we just made almost nothing. And that was as small a group as I could conceive of playing music was three people, guitar, bass, drums. If you're playing jazz, piano, bass, drums, like that's the smallest that it can really get. And if you can't make money doing that, and you can't make money playing even by yourself, it's gonna be hard to make money in this. So, just to sum it up, there's not really any money in music. You have to adjust your expectations down to where they are going to be realistic. You have to view it as like, I want to create music enough that I can do it for free. And then we now need to think about other ways that we can make money in music. Trying to pursue the streaming service thing, because streaming services may have the options to make lots of small amounts of money, whereas otherwise people would have to put up a big investment and buy an album. So having music that's available on streaming services and getting people to listen to it, that could definitely be a possible bit of profitability. One thing that I conceived of, and I will bring you over to my website here if it loads up, was I put my books basically out for free at dvspress.com. And the reason I did that was because I knew that I think this same thing is going to happen in literature, where people are going to be very unwilling to pay for any amount of content. They're going to be unwilling to pay for books even. So you have to find a way that people can basically get something for free but still pay you. And for me, that meant ad revenue. That means ad revenue over on my website. It means ad revenue on this video and other videos that I might do with music. That's what it means. Like, you have to find other ways to make money, and that basically means ads for physical products, because physical products will always cost money. Intellectual property, because you can't control it, basically you have to enter into it with the knowledge that it's going to be almost impossible for you as an independent person to recoup any kind of costs with your artistic endeavor. So yeah, thanks for watching. You can read my books over at dvspress.com. You can check out my website, davidvstewart.com. I'm going to have a good organization of all these videos that'll hopefully be done here over spring break, or over Christmas break, rather. And find me on Facebook, facebook.com/davidvandykestewart. Find me at Twitter as @DavidVStewart. And let me know what you want to see and what you want to hear. Please let me know what you think about this particular topic. The fact that we're losing our ability to make money in music should concern anyone that is interested in a career in music, or just wants to be able to play some shows and make a couple of dollars and make it worth their time. So thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.